and welcome to ThreatTraq Essentials. We're going to take a look at some everyday cybersecurity lessons that we can learn from this week's ThreatTraq stories. I'm here with Matt Kaiser. How you doing, Matt?
Doing great, Don. How you doing?
Let's talk about some of the stories we covered this week. The first one you brought to us was about a domain name corp.com. Just tell me briefly, it's a little complicated how it was registered a long time ago, right?
Right, so it was registered a while ago. The interesting thing about this domain is that in certain deployments of Windows and Active Directory in companies, corp.com in certain situations will receive traffic that's meant for internal corporate networks.
So people put it in there thinking it wasn't going to go outside to the internet, that such a domain didn't exist?
Right, well they would have set it up as, corp would have been the internal domain that everything would have been underneath in Active Directory, except that the way that Windows will try and resolve domains, if it can't find corp, it might try corp.com. So if you're out at Starbucks with a machine that's part of that network and it can't find corp, it'll try to get the next best thing and traffic will go out to corp.com.
And let's talk about that. What kind of traffic? Why is it so dangerous?
So things like authentication requests or requests to get files off of servers, or basically anything that the network expects to be within the corporate network and send traffic, so internal server kind of stuff, will be sent out to corp.com. So it could be literally anything, but in a lot of situations it's things like, you might try and send some files there, might try and send a request or something containing credentials there. So in things that are meant to be inside of your internal corporate network, whatever that may be,
Are going out.
Okay. That is the problem.
So what do we want to tell people to do about this in a corporate network?
I think if you're the manager of a corporate network and you have the power and the backing to do this, make sure that you're no longer using corp. Make sure you're using something that is a subdomain of a domain that you own publicly. So whatever your company.com is, you might want to just set it up to use internal.yourcompany.com or some variation thereof, because you can at least control that anything above your own domain. Right, so even if it goes out to the internet, it'll still come back to yourcompany.com in some way.
So that way it's not going out to wherever, it's being kept internal and the information is protected that way.
It's at least not going to some server that you don't control at all. And that's generally better.
Right. Let's talk about the story Jonathan Gonzalez had for us, which was about what was called the missing semester from your computer science education, that perhaps there are some topics for anybody out there who's thinking of perhaps going to school for computer science or already did, that there are some really everyday things and topics that you guys use in your job that may not be covered.
Sure, and I looked at the list and I totally agree with that assessment. This is something that MIT's open courseware provided. So that's classes that MIT will just basically give away. If you want to learn these topics, you can do so. You won't get an MIT degree for watching the videos or reading the lectures or whatever, but you'll at least have the knowledge, and that's valuable. So I would definitely agree with a lot of the subjects that were on there. I know I knew people as well who had a strict computer science background in college. I have a computer engineering background, but I knew that they were taking certain courses, they learned a certain set of things, that some of it was theoretical, some of it was programming, but a lot of it sort of assumed that you had the background in interacting with a computer, that you wouldn't have had, you wouldn't have had to go through and learn these things that they assumed were kind of basic. But they're not all that basic. Things like version control using Git. Back when I was in college, I don't think Git was really even a thing at that point. It's a very popular version control software, and it just makes sure that when you make changes to your code, you've always got a backup of each version of it. So in case something happens, you make a silly mistake, you can always go back and find a version of it that works.
So this is just a way of really getting some education about these areas of things that perhaps weren't covered in a formal academic setting.
Sure, you may have professors who are very theoretical or who are very into a very specific topic and sort of make assumptions. They may not all be talking to each other and ensuring that the bases are covered. And sometimes people will learn these things on their own or are forced to learn these things in order to keep up with coursework, or when they hit their first real job out of college and find out that, there's something I need to learn first, and then I can actually apply the things that I learned in college to the problem I'm trying to solve. All the little bits of the glue bits, I guess, is one way of saying it, like writing a shell script or just interacting with something. Or there's a section there about cybersecurity. Now, I work in security. I would hope that people who are learning to write code are learning to write code with some level of thought to security, and hopefully that level of thought is not afterthought, but
there may be some missing pieces
Sure.
that need to be filled in.
Yep. So I would recommend anybody who has an interest in, even if you don't have a computer science degree and you'd like to learn some fundamental stuff with how to work with computers, how to do some of the stuff that people with a degree do know, you might want to check this out.
Okay, great. Let's talk about the story. Ken Walsh was his first time on the show. He brought us a story about charging stations and whether or not they may be dangerous.
Sure. So I think the story he brought us was to look out for what's called juicejacking. And the idea behind it is you plug your phone into a public charging station which promises to charge your phone. Sounds like a pretty good deal, except that when you plug a USB cable into your phone, if the other end is not just a power source, but actually a computer, there is a possibility that that computer will try and access data on your phone. That's the theory. Now,
In practice?
in practice, we haven't seen this attack in the wild. There are law enforcement officials who will tell you that this is something to keep an eye out for, that this is a real attack. But so far, I haven't seen any actual examples in the wild of people being arrested for setting up a juicejacking spot and letting data roll in. Ken and I talked about it in depth on the show. We have some idea of how an attack might be done, some theories on certain things. Maybe there's a vulnerability that we don't know about, but it seems to be relatively rare. Maybe there's some sort of angle of attack here that we're thinking about that more feasible than others. But again, you would think there would be at least one documented case in the wild of this occurring if it really was worth worrying about. So far, we haven't seen that.
So in the meantime, any advice we want to give?
Don't worry about it. I mean, if you are super paranoid and you want to worry about it, there are ways you can get cables or make your cables only have the 2 wires needed for power and not be able to send data at all, but it may be an overreaction at this point. I mean, I would love for anyone who has an example of this actually being done in the wild, and not like a demo, not like a proof of concept, like a criminal was arrested because they did this. I'd love to see it.
Thanks for being on the show, Matt, and thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe to our channel. And also, if you want to take a deeper dive into any of these stories, click on the playlist below, and we'll see you next time.